Shalom to the elect of Israel, to the hopeful elect of Israel, you Hebrew Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indian, and Haitians. Gotta give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, in the sincere salutation to all the ark and pushing the truth and believing it's true throughout the four winds of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Agwaf who are listening and learning. The few sisters who are listening and learning. I'm Isaiah, coming at you another lesson in truth, facts, faith, and edification. Another daily edification. The Lord's willing to be edifying. And this is a clip from True News. Title of it is 6 Allies Turn Against U.S. and Buck Iran Sanctions. Okay? Lord's willing to be edifying. This is the 10 toes is breaking up, man.
We're going to begin with what our government is doing to enforce its will on other countries. However, here's the real interesting takeaway here. Other countries are now pushing back. That's right. Belgium, Denmark, Finland, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden. They've just joined an effort, and this is unprecedented, to create a trade exchange to bypass the United States. Mind you, these are countries who in the past have always been in lockstep with the United States. So really, we can't help but ask on a day like this, what gives, right? Michelle Greenstein, she's going to be joining us to break this down for us, and she's going to be here with that in just a little bit. But wait, there's more. Tonight, Reuters has come out with a blockbuster of a report suggesting that the Trump administration is considering a total U.S. ban on Huawei. The Trump administration would essentially be telling the second largest seller of mobile phones in the entire world, you can't do business here. You can't do business in the United States. In fact, you can't even be a part of our banking system or use our banking system. It's a very anti-market, almost socialist move from an administration that often brags about standing for just the opposite. And while still not confirmed, Reuters is reporting that the attack on Huawei, a private Chinese company, by the way, is not coming from the Treasury Department, where one would expect something like this would be founded, right? No. It's coming from the National Security Council. The National Security Council. What is the NSC's formal beef with Huawei? This gets us back to our beginning here, right? Presumably that Huawei has or plans to do business in one form or another with Iran. So the question is the United States overreaching? And what might the global blowback be in a case like this? This is where we begin tonight here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it's time to do news again.
Obadiah chapter 1 and verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. So, what you see is going on is the separation in Daniel chapter 2 in verse 43. And it reads, let's read verse 42. Matter of fact, let's read Daniel 2 and 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with miry clay. And what you see going on is a separation of the 10 toes. Okay? EU, NATO, the 7 heads and 10 horns are separating from the harlot. Okay? The 7 heads and 10 horns, that scarlet colored beast, which is EU and NATO, is separating from the harlot that sits on the scarlet colored beast. And the harlot is Babylon the Great, North America.
The list. A list of the questions we think you'll be asking tomorrow. Just how much are U.S. allies willing to push back against our economic policies? Mr. Trump goes to London to talk NATO, but is the alliance somehow coming undone? And promising news. Is there finally a treatment for pancreatic cancer? But we begin with blowback, as aforementioned, while the U.S. tries to muscle countries and companies all over the world, including Huawei, into not doing business with Iran. The world seems to be pushing back. Normally, we would hear that our usual adversaries and critics and rivals, China, Russia, Iran itself, and others would be coming up with ways to get around U.S. sanctions. But the pushback is not coming from adversaries and critics or rivals. It's coming from our longtime allies, members of the European Union, who have come up with something that's called Instex.
You see, Jeremiah 50:23. How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How is Babylon become a desolation among the nations? How? Obadiah 1:3. The pride of that heart have deceived thee. That's how.
Stands for the Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges. Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges. Instex. In other words, they think countries ought to be able to trade with each other. Novel idea. Joining us now, News with Rick Sanchez, special correspondent Michelle Greenstein. I bet we could almost rename this Instex thing the Iran workaround plan, right?
It's definitely been called stuff along those lines. This facilitates trade between Iran and EU country without sending any money across borders. So like you kind of just alluded to, it's designed to bypass U.S. sanctions. So it's essentially a barter arrangement, and it's not yet operative, but it makes this channel through which transactions can be enabled in the absence of SWIFT, which is the current dominant international payment system. Now, as some background, it was established in January and created as a reaction to the U.S. unilaterally withdrawing from the JCPOA. This is a withdrawal that not only reinstated sanctions on Iran, but also created new ones. So Iran, of course, threatened to pull out as well. So these EU signatories said, hey, no, we promise that we will find a way to keep doing business with Iran. And Instex is part of that effort to get Iran to remain in the JCPOA. Now, France, Germany, and the UK are to be managing this so-called clearinghouse, and it's also been made available to all other EU member states. Belgium, Denmark, Finland, the Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden have now signed on as of this week. And in a joint statement, they called this move a demonstration that Europeans are efforting to facilitate legitimate trade between Europe and Iran. Now, in terms of an international reaction, we had the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling this act European countries enabling a fanatic terrorist state. And we also had U.S. Vice President Mike Pence later this year saying that it's time for Europe to stop undermining sanctions against, quote, murderous revolutionary machines. But I think what's really important to note here, Rick, is that Instex is not actually as revolutionary as it may sound. For one thing, it's yet to enable any transactions, even though it's been operational since June. And also, Instex is only regarding what the Trump administration has not sanctioned. So it fails to cover exports of Iranian oil, gas, and petrochemicals. And it also, and this is really significant, does not cover Iranian imports of food or medicine. So we have to remember that sanctions on Iran really hurt ordinary people by and large, right? It's caused prices of imported medicines to soar. In fact, this August, 5 doctors from both Iran and the U.S. wrote this really great editorial in The Lancet showing that sanctions damaged Iran's universal healthcare system. And they say that Iran's now at a high risk of moving towards a severe situation for provision of health services with substantive impacts on mortality and morbidity. So the universal healthcare system has been sharply hit by these sanctions, mainly because it's now now impossible to import these very key materials. And even Human Rights Watch, which has been criticized in the past for supporting a U.S. imperialist agenda, said that these U.S. sanctions, quote, pose a serious threat to Iranians' right to health and access to essential medicines. So many.
You see, these countries is tired of you bullets, man. They tired of the bullet, man. Okay? They have been under the bullet foot for the longest of time, man, and they tired of it, man. Jeremiah 51 and verse 7. Babylon have been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, her policies, her democracy, her legislations, her philosophies. The nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore, the nations are mad, man. They're mad. Okay? They're mad, man.
You're calling insects kind of more smoke and mirrors than an actual change in policy.
So yeah, that's interesting. I was going to follow up by asking you just that. If it really doesn't help Iran in terms of being able to sell its oil or being able to feed its people, then who's it?
And look, China and Russia is dealing gases, man. And they ain't even dealing with America, man. Okay? They dealing with gases now, man. They done cut North America out, man. Okay?
Helping?
I mean, there's definitely a political upside here. It definitely gives the appearance that these EU countries want to restore quote-unquote normal trade relations with Iran, but they're of course still complicit with the Trump administration's economic warfare. In fact, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, quote, "For the past 5 months, Europe has been trying to give us credit in return for the sale of Iranian crude oil to make the country stay in the JCPOA. But it has..."
And see, you got Benjamin Netanyahu, not a Jew. He's talking, he's complaining, okay? He's complaining. And that's why Jeremiah 50:45 gonna take place. And it reads, Jeremiah 50:45, "Therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord Yahweh, that he have taken against Babylon, and his proposals, that he have proposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them." Who is the least of the flock? Benjamin Netanyahu, the Jew, and the rest of those Israelis over there. They said the least of the flock should draw them out. So they're gonna make North America go to war, man. Okay, with all the other with all the other nations that joined the UN. Okay, what you got to understand is EU, the European Union, or the European Economic Community, the EU, and NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO and EU, all those other countries that join the EU and NATO, they are going to turn against North America, man. Okay? Thus saith the scriptures, man.
Has not been able to do even this little job because it is not even allowed by its master.
So one does wonder, because
by his
we have
master.
to also mention the fact that there's news out there that there are still protests, there is still some
That's right.
turmoil inside Iran. How much of that is manifested by these sanctions and this pressure that's being put on the Iranian economy?
Right, I think this goes back to the essential point, which is that sanctions do hurt ordinary people. This, of course, paves the way for unrest. And this current protest movement that we're seeing now in Iran was sparked by this gas hike, right? And according to U.S. law, this is also important. The president is actually authorized to provide financial and political assistance to Iranians so long as they are committed to being against the government. So it's possible that the U.S.'s hands may not be so clean. But I think it's also, and this is my final point, I promise, it's important to note that although you could say that this is blowback, you could also say that the JCPOA and its subsequent withdrawal by the U.S. actually works right in with the agenda that many are saying the U.S. have, which is regime change in Iran. According to the Brookings Institution, which has been called the most prestigious think tank in the world by the New York Times, they said that this is how regime change in Iran would play out. They said, quote, "For those who favor regime change or a military attack on Iran, the ideal scenario would be that the U.S. and the international community present a package of positive inducements like the Iran deal. And any military operation against Iran would probably be very unpopular, but the best way to maximize support is to strike only when there's widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer."
You know, You don't have to make that your final point. Stick around because I want to bring in Surab Gupta now. He's a policy specialist at the Institute for China-American Studies. How about the point that Michelle was just making? A lot of people would look at this and say, what the United States, and in this case, by proxy, Bibi Netanyahu are essentially saying, right, is we don't like them, and you have to then not like them. And to prove to us you don't like them, you got to make sure you don't trade with them. I mean, it sounds rudimentary, but that's pretty much the argument. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely correct. It's the fading days, the dying days of the unipolar moment, and trying to milk it as much as possible, and trying to see that you coerce and force allies, partners, or anybody in the international community.
But how significant is it that, I think we mentioned this earlier, guys, that this is not Russia pushing back. This is not Iran pushing back. This is not China or Pakistan pushing back. This is the European Union pushing back against the United States of America. How significant is that?
I think it's very...
This is Revelation 17 and 15. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. Verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua have put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua shall be fulfilled. What's the words? The prophecies. Okay? That's why I tell you 2 Thessalonians 2 and 8, by the Spirit of the Lord mouth, which is what? His servants, his messengers, his prophets, man. Okay? When the Lord word is done, that's when World War III is going to start. When the RFID microchip is pushed, when Jacob trouble has come to pass, these things is finna take place. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh, and burn her with fire, them intercontinental ballistic missiles. For power have put in their hearts to fulfill his will. What it said in Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He turneth it like rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. For Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua have put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of power shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is the great city, Babylon the Great, North America, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And that is North America. Through what? Their policies, their legislation, their democracy, their philosophies. Thus saith the Lord.
Very, very significant. The EU has always been an actor which has worked which has sometimes worked ostentatiously, but always in tow with the US. And for the first time, we are seeing the the EU actively questioning itself as to where the heck are we going with the US. Some European countries have followed the US of the US's wars, and it's not really turned out well for them.
Right.
I think it's been a
Iraq,
long time. Yes.
Tony Blair.
Libya.
Egg on his face. Continue.
Yep. And so they've finally come around to thinking that maybe we are not being led necessarily in the best place, in the best direction. And now with populism and Trump's trade protectionism, there's been a real divergence between the two countries.
But there's
This is Isaiah 14 and verse 4. That thou shalt take up this parable against the king of Babylon, and say, how hath the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? The Lord Yahweh hath broken the staff of the wicked, and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continuous stroke, Babylon the Great. He that ruleth the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yeah, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no fellow is come against us to cut us down. Hell from beneath is moved for thee, to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth, the kings, who you made reign with you, right? who fornicated with you in your whoredoms, it have raised up from their thrones, all the kings of the nations, EU and NATO, and they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave. Back to that lower state, right? Like it said in Genesis 3 and 14, on thy belly shall thou go. And the noise of thy vows, the worms is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. And this is what's going on, man. Isaiah 47:1, come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon.
There's a difference here too, and I think
there is no throne for thee.
We would be foolhardy to not mention that these countries who are essentially going against U.S. policy are bound by a treaty to do that, right?
Oh, absolutely, particularly in the Iran deal. And here's the real irony of it. First of all, let me get to your point. The U.S. stepped aside from the six-party deal, which was hammered out with Iran. But the other members of that deal have obligations to Iran.
They signed a deal and they have to honor it, right?
Exactly. So it's fine to say Iran is not honoring aspects of it, but it's also you are not honoring aspects of it. And so, I mean, they have obligations and legal obligations.
Right.
And this has been consecrated as a UN Security Council resolution, international law. So, I mean, you just can't walk away from these things.
So they have an out. They can say to the United States, look, we'd like to be on your side on this thing, but we can't because, after all, we are signatories to this deal, this contract, and we have to honor it.
Yeah. And, you know, this is where the issue has gotten completely out of hand. The US used to champion international law and ensure that parties would adhere to international law. Here the US steps away from international law, and when countries try to adhere to international law, the US says, I will come and sanction you.
Right.
That's the point.
There's a real irony there, right? Cat and mouse game. Now, let's talk a little bit about something I mentioned at the beginning of the newscast, Michelle, and that's this ban on Huawei, which when you...
Nah. Because of your pride, right? This is what the Lord say. Jeremiah 50:11. Because ye were glad, because ye are grown fat as the heifer at grass, and bellow as bulls, and bellow as bulls. Your mother shall be sore confounded. Who is the mother of North America? Great Britain. Your mother shall be sore confounded. She that bare you shall be ashamed. Behold, the hindermost of the nations shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Hey, what you have done, you have destroyed the earth. All the nations is mad, okay? And the Lord say this, man, in Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, the elect of Israel, that ye be not partakers of her sins. This is only the elect of Israel gonna get saved. And that ye receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and power have remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, all nations, and the elect of Israel, and double unto her double according to her works, and the cup which she hath filled to her double. Okay? So a double portion is coming to Babylon the Great for what they have done. Why? Because of this. Obadiah 1:3. The pride of thy heart have deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rocks, whose habitation is high. Thus saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Who? Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. Starting with his prophets. Okay? Obadiah 1:7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. And so with that, I give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushua, Bahashim Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, and a sincere salutation to all the occupant pushing the truth and believing is true throughout the four winds of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Akwaf who are listening and learning. The few sisters who are listening and learning. And let me read this. 2nd Ezra, chapter 11, and verse 40. And it reads, verse 39, 2nd Ezra 11:39. Are not thou it that remainest of the fourth beast, whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of their times may come through them? And the fourth came and overcome all the beasts that were past, the Roman Empire, and had power over the world with great filthiness, and over the whole compass of the earth, which with much wicked oppression and so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. For the earth hast thou not judged with truth, for thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. Therefore is thy wrongful dealings come up unto the highest. Didn't it say your sin reached unto heaven in Revelation 18? Therefore is thy wrongful dealings come up to the highest. Your sins reached into heaven, and thy pride unto the mighty. Hey, the pride, verse 44. The highest also have looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled. What it said in Luke 21? The Gentiles, the land shall be trodden down till the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled, man. Okay? And therefore appear no more thy eagle, nor thy horrible wings, nor thy wicked feathers, nor thy malicious head, nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body, that all the earth may be refreshed and may remain, being delivered from thy violence, that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her. Hey, Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Shalom.